We are looking at, we're kind of, of course, continuing series we started a long time ago when we were looking at Genesis. And we're kind of following the narrative story. Now, we've been in Joshua a couple of weeks. And how does and Joshua is in essence what? What is the basic story in Joshua in a sentence? Okay, Joshua is the leader. Okay, the book of Joshua has to do with the children of Israel conquering the land, taking the land, the promised land. Okay, and so that's the story in a nutshell. We get there by Israel wandering through the wilderness, and we talked about the consequences of their actions and all that kind of jazz. Now, as we approach, and there's a little bit of review, as we approach the promised land, as we approach the Jordan, who is now in charge? Joshua's in charge. And why is Moses not in charge?
Because he couldn't see the promise.
Because he couldn't see the promised land, because of Kadesh, he hits the rock when God said, speak to the rock, and so he doesn't get in. Why isn't Aaron? So he's dead, right? Moses is dead. Why isn't Aaron leading them in?
Aaron's dead.
He's dead. So there's a lot of dead people. In fact, there are a whole bunch of dead people because they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and a lot of people died, in the wilderness, with two exceptions. Who were the two exceptions? Joshua was one, and Caleb was the other. And because, remember, they were the spies that came back and said, we can do it. And the other 10 spies said, oh, the giants, they'll squish us. And we need to go back to get those leeks in Egypt. And so and the people followed them instead of Joshua and Caleb. And so God, as he did a lot in the wilderness, got ticked off and said, you can't go into the land. Not this generation.
Yeah.
So the only way I can be sure that this generation won't enter the land is to have you wander for 40 years. And die.
And it's amazing, the thing they wanted most was leeks.
Oh yeah, that's always leeks. The flesh. And and when you read this, of course we know, we're the reader. Yeah. And I think that's part of the irony in the general story, is we know what they experienced. And they knew, because we're talking about the generation that left. So they knew about life in Egypt. And life in Egypt was not, all leeks and honey. It was pretty tough. I mean, they were making bricks without straw. So, it was a tough life, and they knew it. And that becomes kind of the irony, that this is what they constantly wanting to go back to. Now, as the people, and we're going to see this in what we're looking at today, when we look at the way the people were presented in the wilderness during the Exodus, how does the writer or the redactor, the one who puts these stories together, because he's not creating new stories, he's putting old stories together into a narrative where the stories connect, because you're talking about little oral stories that don't necessarily connect together, but the redactor is drawing them into one narrative. How does he present the people of Israel?
As complainers.
They're complainers. They're a mess. And in fact, there's a lot of times that God says, I've had it. I've had it. We're going to have some kind of, I'm going to wipe them out. And he even says to Moses, something, Moses, let's start over, and we'll make your descendants, my people. And Abraham was a failure, so we're going to try it on with you. But who constantly intervenes?
God.
Well, who intervenes with God? Who talks God out of this? Moses in the wilderness. In the wilderness, Moses talks God out of doing what God wants. Now, I think we want to be real careful not to put too much theological import in the fact that God seems always to be irritated with the people in the wilderness, because God, that's a reflection of God that supports the narrative. That the people are kind of a mess. They're just a complaining mess. And the writer, now why would the writer want to portray, as he's putting this story together into a narrative, 1,000 years later, 1,000 years after this stuff, why would he present his people as such a bunch of pagans?
Because it's the truth.
Well, it's the truth, but why? But we're not going to see it. We're going to see. It's interesting. We're going to see in Joshua a very different presentation of the people, and then when we look at Judges, we're going to see
Another one.
the people go back to what we saw in Numbers. So, we've got something kind of interesting going on here. But again, even if it were true, why would he do it? I mean, if you're writing about the founders of this country, I hear people, I was an old history teacher, I hear people all the time, you don't present the flaws in the founders, you present them as examples that we follow, and they are great men, and they don't make mistakes, and they are so wise, and all this jazz. And if you say, well, let's talk about what Thomas Jefferson was doing, and the fact that there was a lot of hypocrisy in Jefferson. Oh no, that's not the way we want to see our founders. We want to
They're
see them as
human, that's the
paragons. Why would...
Because it's all about God.
Yes.
Okay, it's God's story.
Right.
It's God's story. Now, why would the redactor, the one who's drawing the story, why would he almost go out of his way to present the people? Rarely does he present the people as good. He presents Moses as good. Aaron with feet of clay. But the people, he never says, the people almost never have a good day, except right after they've gotten into trouble and there's been a plague. And then they say, oh, we won't do it again until the next chapter. And what do? They do it again. What do you think is his purpose? Because he's shaping this story. What is his purpose in shaping it that way? Presenting the people as human, but sort of human on steroids. I mean, really human. Like, if I know some people, why do you think that he doesn't seem to present a good side to these people in the wilderness?
He wants us to know that they were sinners.
Okay, because remember, he's writing this to people much later, or this is the narrative he's developing for people much later. So we want to look at what he's trying to tell them, because he's not a reporter writing down information. This is to people who are living much later. So there seems to be a reason he wants to present their ancestors as sinners. Why? What
Because
might
we
they?
are today,
Okay,
too.
because and they were who heard it, and we are too.
Yes.
So maybe we don't want to focus on them as much as we want to focus on God, because that could become a distraction. If these people are paragons, well, why is God helping them? Well, because they're so good.
Yeah.
They're just so good. How can you not love them? Because they're just so good. No, they weren't good. They were pagans. But you know what?
God loved them.
God made a covenant. And even if they don't keep their side, they pay the consequences of not keeping the covenant. But they're not abandoned in the wilderness. Now, the reason I mentioned it is, like I said, we see a major shift in the way that people are presented when we move into Joshua. Because for as bad as the people were in Numbers, Exodus and Numbers, when we look at Joshua, they are really, really good. They are really good. And we're going to see that. And the only blip, and there's going to be a blip, not today, but next week there'll be a blip. Man, they deal with it right away. And even the people that are blipping know that they've done wrong. And it's just a small little group. But back then, it was everybody. That's why they wandered in the wilderness.
You would think with all that happened, the different times that they made God angry and the consequences that he gave them for disobeying, that they would be a lot more fearful about doing stuff they shouldn't be doing.
You would certainly think that would be a logical assumption. And yet, as he's writing this story, he doesn't do that, which may be, like you said, maybe he's trying to reach those people in his time, or maybe all the people in his time, that we fall away, but it's not about us. It's ultimately about God.
Yep.
So don't idolize your ancestors, because they aren't any better than you.
Yep.
And even the leaders, because Moses doesn't enter the land because
He sinned.
he disobeyed God. Okay. All right, so we've got that. Now, we got Joshua, yeah.
Don't you think though, see, when Moses had to hit, he had to hit the rock before, didn't he?
Well, the Kadesh thing is a really interesting thing, because we've got two stories about water at Kadesh. Two stories, one in Exodus and one in Numbers. Same place, same story, water coming out of the rock. The first story, he's told to hit the rock.
Yeah.
And he does it, and the people receive water, and everything is wonderful. In the second story, which it may be the same story, again, we got these strains of tradition. It'd just be real interesting that it happens in the same place. And in the second one, nobody says, oh, weren't we here before?
Yeah.
Didn't we have the same problem back, a year ago? That's never mentioned. It's like it's brand new. But God said, speak to the rock.
Yeah.
And Moses hits
Hit the
it.
rock, like.
Hits it. And bang, once that happened. Remember, one of the things, and we're going to see it, we're going to see it in what we're looking at today. Obedience becomes a huge deal with the law.
absolutely.
We've always had this interplay as we looked at Genesis with these different strands, where you have faith and where you have obedience. And when you look at faith and obedience, they aren't necessarily the same at all. There's a connection, but they aren't identical. I can be obedient and not trust. I can obey you without trusting you at all. And I can trust you, but I don't necessarily have to obey you. So the two may be together, but they don't have to be together. And we've got these strains where, like with Abraham and Abram, where one covenant is, you got to trust me. You got to trust me enough to go. And the other strain says, you got to get circumcised. You got to circumcise your family. Well, getting circumcised has nothing to do with trust. It has to do with obedience. Now, once the law is given, law isn't about trust. Law isn't about trust. I don't obey the law because I trust the United States government. I obey the law because, one, it's the right thing to do,
Yes.
and second, if I don't,
There's consequences.
there's going to be consequences that I don't want to pay. So I obey the law. I don't have to trust anybody to obey it. I just have to obey it. And we've got these two strains. Once we get the law, obedience becomes really, really important. It's you've got to obey. If God says it, then you got to do it. Now, when you do it, are you trusting Him? Oh, okay, probably. But that's not why you're doing it. That's not the first reason you're doing it. You're doing it because,
You don't want to get punished.
well, God says do it. And God says do it. You
Do
do
it.
it.
They can go
You do
both
it.
ways.
Well, I think the two are connected, but I think it's where the emphasis. And once you get law as being really, and this is what Paul kind of deals with, because that's why Paul, when he writes particularly in Romans, that's why he says you got to be real careful with this obedience business. You got to be real careful with it, because obedience and faith aren't necessarily the same. So you obey the law. Why are you obeying it? Because it may make you a better person, but it doesn't necessarily make you better in the sight of God. That's what faith does. And so Paul is going to kind of call on this stuff and revise it as he's writing to a Christian community. Here, the writer seems to really want to focus on, you need to obey. If it says it, do it. Like the old bumper sticker. If the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. Well, okay, that's great, obedience. But faith is a little bit different. There's a little more to it. But we've got here. So Joshua's in charge, right? And what does God do with Joshua right at the beginning, before they even enter, that show that he's in charge? What does God, and he's done it before. Lord have mercy. He's done it a whole bunch of times before. What does he make with Joshua? He makes, but he's really restated. That was on me. He's restating a covenant. And now the covenant is really clear. So we don't have any question about this covenant. What is the covenant he makes with Joshua?
He's going to lead the people.
What's that?
You're gonna lead the people to the
Okay,
promised land?
right, he's gonna be the leader. He's gonna take the place of Moses. I am gonna be with you like I was with Moses, right? Okay, so I'm gonna be with you. Now I've got a covenant. And remember, a covenant always has two sides. Covenant isn't God saying, I'm gonna do this, and then go on. Covenant is God saying, I'm gonna do this,
If.
You do that.
and I expect you to do this. That's a covenant. That's a contract, like any contract. Makes a covenant with Joshua. You're going to be my leader. You're going to be like Moses. And I think that's really significant that he's going to be like Moses. So Joshua's going to do this. What is God going to do on his side of the covenant? What is God?
Lead him and keep his promise.
Okay, and his promise is,
Give them a land.
what's that? He's always going to be with them, and they're going to get this land. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to give you victory when you enter this land. Now, they haven't entered it yet. I'm going to give you victory. What is he looking for on the other side?
Who, Joshua or God?
What is God looking for? What is the people? If God's side is, I'm going to give you victory,
Obedience.
the people,
Yes.
bingo. You got to obey me. You got to do what I tell you to do. Okay? Joshua says, we
Okay.
will. Okay, good, good deal. And in fact, as they start preparing to go, he's doing it, right? What are some of the things that happen even before they cross the Jordan? And the crossing of the Jordan is really an exercise in obedience, right? What are some of the things that happen before the crossing and as they cross that show, the people are going to, as opposed to the people in Numbers, the people are going to obey? What are some of the things that occur that demonstrate the obedience of the people?
You're talking about the ark and the river?
Okay, you got the way they cross. Good night. And how do they end up crossing?
The priest had their feet in the water.
Okay.
And when he did that, God pushed the waters back in the river, made a pathway, just like Moses in the Red Sea, and the people crossed over. The priest stayed there until they crossed over.
Yep.
I'm experiencing deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
That is the same story we saw with Moses. God said, I'm going to be with you like Moses. Almost something very similar happened at the beginning of the Moses Exodus story. Something very similar happens with Joshua. We got parallel figures, and that may be something we file away because we might look at other ways that Moses, at least as the redactor is telling his story, how those two figures are similar. So they do it, and remember, the crossing is very detailed. God's instruction is very detailed. I mean, Levites are going to carry the ark, just like it says in Leviticus. Priests are going to lead it. People are going to pass by. Remember the story with as part of that, carrying the 12 rock stones.
Yes,
and we got those two again. Remember, we got a redactor putting together stories. We got those rocks. God says you're going to carry rocks across, one from each tribe. Yes, still there. But one story, the rocks end up being piled up at a place called Gilgal.
Yeah.
And the other one, the rocks are piled up. You remember?
Yeah.
You said in the river.
In the river, right. And one, the rocks, those 12 stones are put right in the river. The other ones that put in Gilgal while they across the river where they make their camp. Same story. He doesn't say, pick 24 people to carry 24 rocks.
Yeah.
It's just how it ends is different. In both of them, though, they say, I guess they both have something in common. They both say they are still there. You can find them both right now. And both of them symbolize what? Whether you look at one or the other, what is it symbolizing? God, yeah, that God is in charge and commanding. So they are certainly being obedient as they cross the Jordan. What else, after they get across the Jordan, what shows their obedience?
Well, for that, one of the peoples wanted to stay there instead of going on.
Okay, now...
Yeah, they didn't want to go with the rest of them. They wanted to stay on the other side.
Okay, we're talking about two tribes. That's
Yeah.
another example. You had two tribes. Remember the two tribes? Actually, it becomes 2.5 tribes. Gad and Reuben, the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad. Now, we got this in Numbers. What makes the tribes of Gad and Reuben interesting? What makes them different than the other? And the half tribe of Manasseh. What make those tribes a little different?
They're farmers rather than
Well, they're ranchers
ranchers.
because they have cattle. They're ranchers. What is the result of them being ranchers? What makes, what's that? They stay on the other side. They want to be on the east side. They want to be in Gilead because Gilead is good for the cattle.
Yeah.
And we want to stay in Gilead. And Moses says, sure.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. Because remember, they fought the Ammonites and they fought the Moabites. And so they took land on the east side. That's not the promised land. Promised land is on the other side of the Jordan, west side of the Jordan. You could keep this land, but you had to fight with the other 10 tribes. You had to join the other 10 tribes to fight. Why did they need to join the other 10 tribes to fight? Because they already got that land.
Yeah, because they all helped each other to get to where they are.
Okay.
So they had to use the fighting men.
Okay,
And
so
fight.
we've got two streams, seems like Joshua has 2 points that he really wants to make in telling the story. One, that the people are obedient, right? Because, and we'll see it in the story of Jericho. I think that's why it's there. Story of Jericho, they are obedient. The other strain is they are unified. They are united. They aren't divided. Now, mention it. We're going to go to Judges after we do Joshua. In Judges, they are not obedient and they are not unified. They never fight together. In fact, sometimes they fight one another. Tribes are fighting one another. Judges is a mess. They're just a mess. So you get a really different presentation. Okay, so they do that. They cross the river, right? And in here, the tribes of Gad and Reuben are moving across with everybody else. They're fighting men already. They get to Gilgal, right? Oh, by the way, before they get to Gilgal, even before they cross the Jordan?
Circumcised.
Well, what do they send? Who do they send to sort of survey the country? They send 2 spies. Now, to us, we know the story. Sending out spies has not had a good history, right? Because sent out 12 and 10 of them came back and said, you can't do this. He sends 2 out. What's the story with the 2 spies?
Meet Rahab.
They meet Rahab and go to Jericho, scouting out the country, find out what do they find out about Jericho and the people of the land?
They're afraid.
They are
They're afraid
terrified.
of the Israelites because they knew God was with them. So God always shows his hand.
Right, God is with them. So they are there. It says their hearts melt.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Rahab does what with them?
She protects.
She protects them, hides them away. And they make like a covenant with Rahab, in exchange for you hiding, we will, when we take the city of
Protect.
Jericho, we're gonna protect you. You got to put a crimson cord, rope outside your window, and that'll tell us not to, because she lives in the wall. Yeah, that'll tell us not to do what we're going to do with everybody else, which they do with everybody else.
And she was told to take everybody.
All their family.
Yep.
Cram them into your apartment. It may be an efficiency, but you're going to cram them all in.
Make them sleep on the floor.
Make them sleep on the floor. Make them stand up. There's a bathtub. You put it to use. Okay, so we've got this with Rahab. Before they've crossed the Jordan, they're at Gilgal. What are 2 things that show obedience after they've crossed? And they do it together, so it's unity too. There's 2 things. One of them, they have the first Passover in the land. Lord have mercy. They celebrate the meal, which seems to be really interesting because that's when it started. The Exodus really started, and this is when the Exodus ends. And we know the Exodus is ending because what else ends? the manna from heaven ends, and they start living off the land. So the manna from heaven ends. They start living on the land. What else do they do at Gilgal? They delay their battle plans a little bit. That's what they do. They do the circumcision. They do the circumcision.
You have to give them a few days.
Yes, have to give them a few days to reevaluate their situation. But they, and again, I think that becomes really significant. And it was never mentioned in Exodus or Numbers about whether they were circumcised or not. But here it says, oh, by the way, the people from Egypt were, but the people in the wilderness weren't. Oh, okay, I'll buy it. It becomes, if you look at the story, the point of the story, this is a sign of obedience. I mean, this is, not only are they having Passover, which they were told to do, but they are doing the ultimate sign of obedience, the sign that God gave as part of the covenant with Abraham, obedience. Okay. And so there we are. We're at the Jordan. They're getting ready to cross. We're right at we're going to go back a half step, verse 13 of chapter 5, because I think this is significant. Joshua is there. He is by Jericho, and who appears?
Saw a man
He
standing.
sees a man with a sword, and what does Joshua immediately say to that guy?
He wants to know if he's for them or an enemy.
Are you friend or foe? And what does the guy say?
Neither.
Neither, which is kind of interesting. He doesn't say, I'm one of your guys. He says, neither. Who is he?
The commander of the Lord's army.
I am the commander of the Lord's army. Now, why does that become really significant as we read this story? What is that saying to us, the reader?
That God is with him.
God is with him. And not only is he with him, he's going to be leading them, going to be directing them, going to be fighting for them. God is going to be engaged here. And evidently Joshua must recognize it, because what does Joshua do? He falls on his face. And why do you fall on your face? That's in reverence and worship. And what does he say?
He asked what the authority was.
Tell me what to do. Joshua says, tell me what do you want me to do? And which shows Joshua's looking to do what? Obey. He doesn't say to him, I trust that you're going to lead me, which would have been fine. There wouldn't have nothing wrong with that. If he says, yes, thank you, Lord, I believe you will lead us through. He doesn't do that. He says, what do you want me to do, Lord? Because that's what the writer wants to emphasize. It's obedience, it's about obedience. And what does this commander of the Lord's army say?
First, take your shoes off.
You got to take your shoes off. Why are you taking the shoes off? This is holy ground. Okay. And what does Joshua do? Duh. He doesn't. He doesn't. Now, again, this is kind of another deja vu, just like with the river. Who else had an encounter like this? Moses, when he's before the burning bush, same thing. The bush says, take your shoes off, you're on holy ground. And it happens again here. And one of the things that I'm suggesting, I suggested last week, again, to file away. It's not going to be a major part of the story, but I think it's lying behind what's happening here with Moses and Joshua. And I do believe the redactors see them as parallel figures. He's not saying Moses is superior. He's seeing them as equal, as two that are together. The difference is going to change as Israel develops much later, but going to be very, very, very similar, at least how this storyteller is conveying it. Moses becomes the source of what? Through Moses, what do the people receive? Law. Through Joshua, what do the people receive? Both of which are coming from God. But God is using Moses to convey the law. God is going to use Joshua to do what? Land. It's going to be law and land. And that's going to be one of the three pillars of ancient Israel. That Israel is going to say, we know that God is with us because we've got the law. We've got the law which shows that God is with. This is a law not to you, But to us, we've got the law. Now remember, Paul says that's part of the problem with the Jews. They believe because they've got the law, they have some kind of a special relationship with God, but having the law and not obeying the law doesn't do any good at all. And then he later says it's not going to make any difference in the sight of God anyway, but it doesn't even make you a better person to just have it and not follow it. It's like having a constitution in your pocket and never reading it. That doesn't mean anything. You got to follow it for it to have meaning. So law they've got. We know that we are God's people because we got the law. We also know we're God's people because we've got land. We've got the land. And that shows, and the land is going to be increasingly focused on Jerusalem and particularly on the temple. The temple is going to be sort of symbolize the land. As long as I've got the temple, I've got a piece of the land. What's going to be the third pillar? So we've got law that's going through Moses. We've got land that's going to be conveyed through Joshua. And what's going to be the third pillar later? And we see these in the New Testament, particularly the Gospel of Luke. What's going to be the third pillar that a Jew could look at and say, yes, you're with me?
Jesus.
Okay. What are they? That's really good. What are they going to call Jesus? What's that? They're going to call him King of Kings. That's exactly right. They're going to call him King of Kings. They're going to call him Christus, Messiah. And you know who was also called Christus? Alice is 100% right. Every single king of Israel was called a Christus. Because every single king of Israel had, because Chrisma in Greek means to pour. Therefore, Christus means the one on whom something is poured. What is poured on every single king of Israel? Oil is poured. And so the kings are, that's what it says in the second Psalm. Kings are Christus. They are the adopted son of God. When they have the oil poured, they become part of God's family. That's why when the king is out of the picture, the Jews start looking for sort of the ultimate Christus. The Christus that is coming. The king that's going to really save us, not only politically, but also spiritually. So we've got these three pillars, and the kingship is going to come through David. So we've got Moses' law, land Joshua, King David. What are they going to lose first? King. What are they going to lose second? Land. What do they have left? Law. And that's why they're going to become more and more focused on the law as the sign that we are God's people, because they've lost the other two. The other two don't exist anymore. So you can't say, I've got a king, because the king isn't there. Interesting. As you read the Old Testament, there were attempts to kind of reassert this kingship. It's really, really interesting. And Luke, and we can talk about that sometime. Luke does a lot. I think uses these three more than the other evangelists. Okay. Oh, we're at chapter 6. Jericho is here. They're across the river, right?
Yep.
And what do we know about Jericho? What does the writer tell? We know they are afraid. So they have done what?
Sealed everything up.
Okay, they've closed themselves in. Now, that's really a big deal that they've closed themselves in. Now, why? We already know why they're afraid, because the spies told us. Why are they afraid?
Because the Israelites will
Because God's
take
with
them
them.
out.
Because God is with them. That's what it says. God is. They know God is with them. Now, the fact that they closed in, that's really a big deal. What are they preparing themselves for if they're closed in? Now, see, we don't do that now. This isn't something that's part of military strategy. Now, for a lot of reasons. But when they close themselves up, what are they preparing for?
Their death.
Well, no, actually not.
An attack?
Trying to keep them out.
Okay, an attack. Why would that be really effective? They're shutting themselves up behind
Closed doors.
their walls, right? They are behind their walls. If they're behind the walls, we're talking about Israel. Israel has spears, right? They got arrows. Well, you got a spear, you go up to a wall.
Yeah, it's not gonna do any good.
We got planes, we got tanks. You don't build things like that anymore, because you can do what? Blow holes in it, right? So when you close yourself out behind walls, if you shut yourself in, you are preparing for a siege, and sieges take...
Days.
No. Wouldn't take days. Wouldn't take days.
No, I.
Years, yes. Yeah, sieges would take years. You know, you hear about sieges, that's later when we look in the second book of Kings, you know, Nebuchadnezzar, I'm wrong. The Assyrian that surrounds Jerusalem, lays siege to it. You know, he's there for years and his army retreats because there's a plague in his army. You know, so his army's got to leave because they've been around waiting for Jerusalem. Because when you got a siege, what are you doing? You're waiting to starve the people out. That's the only way you're going to get in. You're not going to get in by getting through the wall. You're not going to get in by getting through the gate. You know, you got to starve them out. That's the way it is. That's what a siege is all about. That's what they're preparing for. They're not going to send their army out to fight. That's stupid. Unless you know you're going to can beat them. You're going to hide behind the wall. Now the danger is, of course, when you run out of food and water, you're in
Trouble.
you're in big trouble. And that's why in Jeremiah he talks about people are eating animals, eating anything, cats and dogs, because the siege is causing you eat anything. But most cities, you know, you make sure you have a water supply, you make sure you have food. You know, you could hold out for a long time, you know. So that's what they're preparing. That's that shutting in, is they are preparing themselves for the siege. Now I think it's important to know that, because what follows becomes becomes more radically counterintuitive when you think about the fact that they're preparing for a year or more, the people of Israel surrounding them as they're under siege. There was a city, Constantinople, you know, for years withstood attacks because they had farms inside the city. They had a water supply that supplied the city that you couldn't cut off. You had farms inside. So if you had a siege,
You were fine.
you were fine. You raised crops. You know, the only way people could get through the wall. But you know something? It's hard to get through a wall, especially when you have two of them, and that's what they did at Constantinople, 2 walls. You know, you couldn't do it until the Turks came and it's the game changer. Guess what? You know what the Turks had that enabled them to get through Constantinople? They had a cannon. They had cannons. And once you introduce gunpowder, you know, and iron or stone, doesn't matter. Once you have cannons, game is over.
Well, where did
The forts, everything changes
where
with
did
forts.
those big things come in? Where those
Catapults?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well you could shoot things over, but you ain't going to knock the wall down with a catapult. You might be able to hurl stuff over the top, which they did. They often, and this is awful. Ancient warfare was terrible. Infected animals, diseased animals, diseased people. You know, they hurl over the wall because, you know, you had to wait it out until the people in the city decided to open the gate and let you in or die. You know, that was the only choice you had. So you did whatever you needed to do. Cannons changed the game. You know, cannons changed the game because now all forts were vulnerable. All forts were vulnerable. Walls were vulnerable as long as you had cannons. And good night, the Turks. They just had a cannon and just kept shooting for weeks and weeks the same place in the wall to eventually batter a hole, bring it down. That's what they did. But they could do it. And the Byzantines couldn't stop them inside the city. Okay, so they're getting ready for a siege. Long time. What's the first thing the Lord says to Jeremiah? Joshua.
To walk around the city.
Well, even before that.
Oh,
Okay.
Very first thing he says in verse 2.
I've delivered
I have. Now, I want you to notice that. He says, I have handed Jericho over to you. I have handed. Now, is that present? Is he talking about something in the present tense? Or future tense? Is this future? No.
it's now.
It's already happened. I have, and it's an English translation of Hebrew, and they've translated with a tense called perfect. But it infers past action. It's already happened. That's really significant. What is the Lord saying to Joshua? The city already is yours. It's yours. It's not like I will enable you to conquer this city, or I will be with you, or I will give you the city when you do these things. He says, look, it's done. The city already belongs to you. Now remember, that's not a surprise because that's part of the covenant, right? I'm going to give you victory. Now, on your side of the covenant, which I've already done. Now your side is what? What is the battle plan?
To walk around the city for 6 days.
To walk around the city for 6 days. But it's not just walk around the city for 6 days. What are you
Playing
doing?
Trumpets and,
Well, you got an ark.
yeah, carrying it.
And you're carrying an ark and you're blowing certain kinds of trumpets, shofars. That's what they're called. And they are ram's horns. Ram's horns.
And all the men had to walk, all men.
And they're walking around. You're just walking around the city. And you're supposed to do it for
6 days.
6
and one
days.
day.
Okay. And there's a lot of sevens in there, right? Why are there so many? 7 trumps, 7 horns,
Because that's-
7 days.
That's a special.
That's a special number. That's a sacred number. A perfect number is 7. So it's 7. Who is going to be, the ark is there. Who is blowing the horns?
Priests.
Priests are blowing the horns. The ark is there. What does the ark represent? The presence of God.
Presence of God.
Well, I told you, later they're going to talk about the covenant being God's footstool. So God's presence is there with the covenant. His kavod, His glory is there with the covenant. And in fact, one place it talks about the Lord is going to lead you because the covenant is in front of them. So the Lord is literally leading them. Okay, they're doing this, a 7. Now, this is a strategy. And then in 7 days, on the 7th day,
Walk around the city 7 times.
going to walk around 7 times. Okay.
Blowing their
horns.
trumpets and the priests, all of them. are-
Yeah. And what's going to happen then?
Then they have to give a shout when God says to.
Then a big shout, and then what's going to happen?
The walls fall
Wall's going to
down.
come tumbling down. Okay. Now, understand, he's writing to people who know about sieges. For us, we say, oh, that's kind of crazy stuff that he's saying to do. And I think it is kind of crazy stuff he's telling them to do. But it's even crazier, 3,000 years ago, when they don't have cannons, you don't conduct a siege and expect it to be over in a week. That doesn't happen. Now, if it said, the army of Jericho marched out to confront the Israelites and they defeated the Israel, okay, that'd be different. But this is not how you conduct a siege. You don't walk around it for 6 days. 7th day, do it 7 times and shout. This is counterintuitive. What is the writer, what point is he trying to make to the reader, us reading it later?
Well, God lives up to what he says.
That this is
His
God's
promises.
plan. Now, the expectation is, what's the covenant? Victory, obedience, right? Victory, obedience. The expectation is what?
Land.
Well, the expectation is the people are going to obey, are going to do this. So Joshua's not going to say, well, that's nice to know information, but this is the dumbest siege I've ever heard. There are certain things we better do. We better find a way to cut off their water. We better find a way to start shooting diseased bodies into their city. We got to get this siege cooking, right? He doesn't. That's not what he says. In fact, how does Joshua respond?
He tells them to do what God
He tells
says.
them to do it.
Yeah.
He tells them to do exactly what the Lord said. Now, Joshua, I think it's really interesting. Joshua never says to the Lord,
Why?
yeah, why? Wouldn't you think Joshua's a military leader? Don't you think that would come up in the conversation? Well, Lord, that's pretty good stuff, but don't you think we should be shooting a few dead bodies in there?
I can see that from a human point of view, but when you've seen God before you over and over and over again, somewhere you have to say to yourself,
my sword and my strength is not going to do it. It's going to be my obedience in God. Somewhere you got to learn.
Good. And I think that's the point he's trying to make.
Okay.
I think that's the point that Joshua's obeying. You know, we would expect, and I'll tell you something. I can guarantee you, if this story was in Numbers, the people would say what? We don't want to do this. We want to go back to Egypt.
Yeah.
What the heck are you telling us to do such a crazy thing? That doesn't make any sense. You know, and God says, you know, a plague will help them. You know, and Moses says, oh, calm down, you know. We don't have that, which means the situation is a lot different. Joshua never questions this, because what the writer wants to emphasize is Joshua is obedient. You know, Joshua's obedient. And so he tells the people this stuff, right? And so we certainly expect the people, because God hasn't talked to them. Joshua's talked to them.
Yep.
You know, we'd expect them to do what?
Who?
Joshua.
Oh,
Joshua.
Complain.
I mean, that's nice, but we're not going to do anything. We'll do it, but we better do something else. You know, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they don't believe it can happen.
Yeah, well, that's the people we've seen in the past, right? They're going to start mumbling and grumbling and doing that kind of stuff. How do the people respond?
They do what he said.
They do it! Gosh, I bet you the writer is trying to emphasize what?
Obedience to
That the
God.
people are obedient and unified. You know, it's not even like, it's all the people. It's not like most of the people, but some of them question the command, which we saw all the time in Numbers, but we don't see it at all here. Everybody buys in to a plan that has solid military strategy, right?
No.
Walk around, go back to camp, walk around, go back to camp. And on the seventh day, walk around 7 times,
And don't
blow
say-
the horn, and shout.
Yeah,
Don't
don't
say
say
anything.
anything.
That's right. When they're looking down at the wall, shouting stuff at you, don't say anything back.
Don't say
Just walk around. Okay. Now, who is leading them in this? For this strategy to work, there's only one way it's going to work.
God.
It's for God's going to win the victory, which He's already said He has
Giving them the city.
done, right? He's given them the city. And so, beginning in verse 12, what do Joshua and the priests do?
Took up the ark of the Lord.
They do the exact same thing they were told to do. And it's really interesting that he mentions they do it on the first day, right? They do it on the first day. And then he mentions they do it
The second.
on the second day. And he goes into the same kind of detail. Now, why do you think the writer felt the need? Because remember, we're talking still about a time, and always have this in the back of your head. You know, we're talking about a time when they're writing on the skin of reeds. I mean, they're not writing on paper, or they're not writing digitally on computer. Words had value then, because every little piece of paper they used was really expensive. So if he's using this to describe the second day, he must really believe that's important, because he could have said they did it in the first day just like he did after the second, and they did it the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth day. You know, he could have done that just as it, but he goes into the same detail about the second day. Why do you think he felt it was important to say the same thing twice? Didn't say it 3 times, said it twice. Why do you think it was so important?
Carried out the instructions.
They carried out the instructions. It wasn't like they did it the first time, and on the second day, well, they kind of did it. And, you know, they weren't nearly as enthused. You know, the writer wants to convey that the people were
Exactly obedient.
exactly obedient. God told them to do it. They did it. They did it. After the second time, because remember, by ancient standards, by law, you know, if you do it, if one person said it, it might be true. If 2 people said it, you believe it. You believe it, you know. So if one person says you're sick, maybe. If 2 people say you're sick, lie down.
Yeah.
You know, lie down. That's what they believed. Okay, so that happens, right? Obedience. It's just all the way through this story. We got obedience. What happens on the 7th day?
They walk around quietly.
They, same
Seven
deal,
times.
right? Same deal. 7, perfect number. What does, as they do it 7 times on they've done it 6 times on time number 7, what does Joshua do?
Tells them to shout.
Okay, now we need to blow the shofars, and we're
Shout.
going to shout, right? And what does he tell them?
The Lord has given you. the
Has
city.
given you the city. Again, he's not saying you do this, God will give you the city. He says the Lord has already given you the city. Okay? So this isn't, it's like the emphasis is, it's not based on what you're doing, even though it may be a little bizarre. It's already happened. You know, you were doing this almost in response to what God has already done, not as the means to get God to do it. Okay?
When they went in there, they killed men, women, and children, and their cattle and everything.
Yeah,
They
well, hold on that because we're going to get there in just a second. Because what does Joshua, even before they do that, before they've blown the trumpet and shouted, what does he tell them about the contents of the city?
Oh.
They can't touch anything.
Well, no, that's supposed to touch stuff.
They can take the gold, the silver, the brass, and they bring it to the house of the Lord.
Yeah,
One
that's,
other
I'm
thing.
sorry, that's right.
But everything else is to be destroyed.
Yeah.
That belongs to God,
Boom.
and everything else is destroyed.
Everything else
Take
is
nothing else.
everything else is. But it's interesting. It's devoted to God for destruction. So, in a sense, even the stuff they're destroying is devoted to God, right? God has the stuff they're destroying, and it's being destroyed because
He said so.
God says so. But I don't want to destroy it. Well, God said so, so you got to do it. Right? Because it all belongs to God. Okay. With an exception. What's the exception? When you get into that city, there's going to be a lot of destroying going on in that city. Okay, Rahab, and again, emphasized her line of work.
Yeah.
She's a working girl. Rahab is a party girl. She has her own profession. And like I said before, remember she was one of 4 women that are mentioned in the genealogy in the Gospel of Matthew, which is really interesting, along with Tamar. Anyway, so this is what they're going to do. So we're going to do that. He even tells them, again, redactor telling this, shaping the story. He even warns them. What's the warning Joshua gives before the walls come a-tumbling down? Because he kind of gives them a warning. Because he's already said, look, everything is going to be devoted to God for destruction. And this is even before he talks about the silver and the gold. But what does he warn the people about?
Trying to keep that stuff.
Okay, you don't want to covet it. So don't look too closely at it. Because if you look too closely at it, what?
Greed.
You're going to want it.
You're going to want it.
And it isn't yours. Because it belongs to God. And if God wants it destroyed,
He will destroy it.
it's going to be destroyed. You're supposed to destroy it. Because that's what obedience is all about. This kind of blind obedience. Okay, so with the exception of the gold and silver that end up going to the Lord. Okay, so what ends up happening
They put
on the 7th day?
The wall falls and they all.
The wall falls down just when they shout and the horns go off and the walls come a-tumbling down. And what do the people go do?
They rush in.
They rush in and they take it. Now, obviously, and so far, this ram's horn, the Jews associate that with the law because that's the sound they heard when the Lord was speaking to Moses in Exodus. When he got the law, that was the sound, was the ram's horn. So it's something that they associate with the law. And they still use it for certain ceremonies. Okay, law comes down. Clearly, there's kind of an irony with the wall coming down, with when the people shout and blow the horn. What's kind of ironic with the walls, these huge
Because they didn't
walls
use
come
anything
across.
against
They
the
didn't use
walls.
anything against it. And of course, there ain't much they could use against it. You know, walls don't tumble down until you take the city, and then you have to take them down. You know, walls don't, because they got no means to get a wall to collapse. They don't have it. They don't have the technology to cause a wall to collapse. And yet the wall here
Collapse. All around the
collapses.
city.
Collapses. So this great human edifice that protects the city
Falls.
falls in
And it
the
isn't
face,
one part,
in the
it's the whole
face
way
of, in the face of God. Okay.
You have no power against God.
Yes, it falls. And that, I think there's this little irony there, that this human edifice that they assumed was going to protect them, that's why they shut themselves in. And it should have. It should have protected them, but it didn't. And what do they now? What do they do when they get in the city?
They kill everything. Animals.
They kill, and the writer wants to make sure we know who gets killed.
Why? That's something I'm
Okay.
curious about. Why would they
Let's
kill?
look at this. They kill everything. They kill animals. They kill
Children.
men and women. They kill children. They kill babies. They're killing everything. Everything. And not only that, they're burning clothes and they're destroying everything. Everything is destroyed. In fact, in the end, they're going to do what to the city?
They're actually told to burn it.
They're going to burn the city.
Burn it right to the
Yeah,
ground.
they're going to destroy the city. Okay. What is the point? Now, if that should make you uncomfortable, that God said, kill every living thing.
That's what I
Everything.
don't understand that.
Well, what about the babies? We can let the babies live. Kill every baby. They haven't done anything. What about the dogs? Coco Chanel. Coco Chanel running around Jericho. Every living thing. Why? What is, and again, we're looking at it as a story that's conveying a message. We are not looking at it as an impartial, objective, historical description. Because this is based on stories that the redactor is writing 1,000 years with stories being passed down. You know, what point is he trying to make? For one, we know that's not historically what's going to happen because we're going to see it in Judges, that every living thing isn't killed. Because in Judges, there's all kinds of people living in the land. You know, so Judges is going to present something different. But in Joshua, every living thing is killed. Every human being is killed. Why? Why is this almost emphasized? I mean, he didn't need to even put this in. Why does he put this into his story?
Because
It's kind of a downer.
they were obedient to what God said. to
Okay,
them to
that's
do.
one, I think. If God said,
Do it, you do it.
do it, you do it. If God said do it, you do it. Again, that should makes me uncomfortable, you know, and I hope that every modern person feels a little uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
But that's the point he's making, that this is a radical obedience. Because, you know something? If radical obedience is here and radical non-obedience is here, where do most human beings stand? If there's a line segment and this kind of obedience is here and not obeying at all is here, where do you think most humanity stands?
Probably in the middle.
What's that?
Middle of the road.
That's what I said.
At best. You know, we may be maybe here, you know, if the midpoint is here, we may be here. Some of us may be here, you know, that fat part of the bell curve. And so what's being emphasized here, he knows his audience. He knows his audience at best is right in the middle. You know, so he's going to emphasize what?
Obedience.
When God gave victory to your ancestors because they were radically obedient. You know, and you're here, maybe you're never going to make it here. But you know, maybe you could be here. You know, maybe you could move in that direction a little bit. What do you think? You know, maybe you could kind of move in that direction a little bit.
Are you saying then that they did not do that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
What's it?
I know. The trouble is, the trouble is, Alice, when we look at Judges, which is also in the Bible, these people are still there. So Judges still gives these still people are still living in the land. So which one is right? Did they kill every living thing, or were there still people living in the land
Could
when they
people
took
move in
it?
afterwards?
Well, could be, but it doesn't say it in Judges. It doesn't say, oh yeah, then these people moved in, because there are people who are living in the land.
They're still, well.
What it means is, what we got to be real careful, and again, let me take a half step back. If anyone wants to read this as objective history, go for it, do it. I don't think that's the best reading of the Old Testament, because I think they're stories. With me, I don't think they were intended to be objective history lessons. Maybe they were. I can't talk to the guy who wrote it, because he's not here. I don't think that's assuming that 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they had the same view of truth and history that we have now, which they didn't. But okay, maybe somebody did, and so maybe that's what they were doing. I don't know. But if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I don't have, that doesn't hurt my feelings. I think a better reading is to read it as story. Therefore, you don't worry about the fact that if you've got one thing here and something different here, you don't have to say, well, it happened twice, or it happened 3 times. You don't worry about it. It's the same story. It's just being presented in different ways. I think here the writer is focusing on unity and obedience. Whoever is putting together Judges, and it may be somebody else, that's not their focus. They don't want to, that's not their focus. So the way they present the story is slightly different. The way the writer of Numbers presents it is slightly different. So might it be, maybe they did kill every human being in the land. I kind of hope they didn't, because I got a problem. That's not the God I worship that says kill every baby. That causes me problems, ethical problems, moral problems. That's not the God I see in the New Testament. If I say this is a story that's being shaped to emphasize obedience, now I can now I don't know whether I feel comfortable, because I still feel uncomfortable with it, but I don't start saying, do I really want to worship a God who believes every baby should be killed? Every horse, every pig should be killed? What kind of God is that?
God sacrificed his own son.
Yeah, well, that's a terrible God. And you could say, well, the justice of God is different. No, time out. That's not justice. God's killing an innocent baby? For what purpose? I can't get my head around that. Therefore, I think, and I don't think that's moral. I think people have always struggled with it. I think that's why we want to look at it as story. If not, we've got a lot of discussing to do on how God can do this, because I don't know that I can find a justification. Now, the other reason I think that the writer is doing it is this land is going to belong to Israel. This is going to be their land. So you can't have anybody else in it. This is going to be theirs. They're not sharing it. This is going to be their land. So everything has to be done. Everything has to be wiped clean. The slate has to be clean, and it'll be their land. Now, again, when you look at Judges, that's not the case, because they talk about people who are still in the land, in Judges, and they have to kind of deal with it. Even a practical sense, practically, can they kill every human being in an area? I don't know that you could do that. I don't know practically you could do that. Even Hitler couldn't do that.
Kick them out.
How do you, every animal, I don't know that practice, and I don't know what kind of plagues would take place with all the corpses everywhere. But clearly in here he says it, and I think the reason is, again, emphasizing obedience. But again, if you want to see it as historical fact, I'm good with that. That's fine. Just I hope you get a good lesson. Something positive, and not, I can't worship this kind of God. This isn't the Father of Jesus Christ that would do this.
Who were the people that were in Jericho? What tribe? What?
Well, they would be part of a broader people. They're going to call the people that are in the land Canaanites as a whole, and that's kind of a derogatory term, because we know, because we read Genesis, that the Jews view Canaanites, not only are they the possessors of their land, but who was Canaan? Do you remember who Canaan was?
No.
He was the grandson who Noah cursed when he was stretched out there and naked, and he cursed Canaan, who at one point is a grandson, now at the point sort of a son, curses him. And so the Canaanites are the people that carried the curse. For whatever, they were the people associated with the land.
Because my footnote said that
Right.
that was a judgment on them.
Right.
God was judging on them, just like prior to that, he
Right.
had the plagues and whatever, and killed people
Right.
for
Right.
disobedience.
Well, right. Well, the Canaanites are and it's going to be sort of a blanket term that they're going to use. And it's really interesting, in the Gospel of Matthew uses it, which is really interesting, because it's not a term that people used for thousands of years. But he's going to call the woman with the demonic child that Mark calls a Syrophoenician, Matthew's going to call her a Canaanite, which is calling out this ancient title for people that should have been wiped out. There should not be, according to Joshua, there should not be any Canaanites. They shouldn't. They ceased to exist because they killed them all. So it's again, got to throw this out because it's here. And how do you deal with it? This is how I deal with it. And so that's what I'm teaching you. But you can leave here and say, boy, he's wrong. He's dead wrong. This is verifiable history. If there was a guy with a camera, this is what he would have shown. Piles of corpses. Just piles of corpses. That's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all.
Mine says down here at the bottom, the Hebrew term refers to the irrevocable giving over of things or persons to the Lord, often by totally destroying them.
That's what he says. That's why it's a devoting to the Lord. It's not, wipe them out just for the heck of it. They belong to me, and if I want them destroyed, then I want them destroyed. And a radical obedience. I think that's important.
Myself don't choose to see God as that.
Yeah, and I think that's. Do I see God as the one who wants obedience, who expects obedience? Yes, I do. I have a problem with a God that says wipe out every living thing.
That's what I meant, yeah.
And so, but that may be something we have to struggle with. That maybe that's part of the struggle. Maybe the struggle is important and not the reconciling, not coming to a conclusion and saying, well, he did this, so it's okay. It's okay. Maybe we want to be careful, because when we say, well, it's okay, as I'm looking at the world, who do I think God wants to wipe out? What peoples do I want? Think that I sincerely believe, not playing games, but I sincerely believe God would rather have gone. Therefore I can, in obedience to God, do it. That's a danger. And so,
So the
that's
danger
why.
is you choose not to do it, or you choose to be obedient.
Well,
And that's humanity.
that's right.
So, as you were talking, that keeps coming back to my head, is like, ours are not to question why, ours is what to do or not.
I
That's
think
God.
we better
That's my faith.
we better be darn sure that that's what God would want.
If God told him to do it. I'm
Well,
sure
that's right, and
he would
that's
do
the
it.
radical obedience. What I guess I want to say is, making this historical and not a story, I think creates problems. As we interpret it, if you want to make it historical, that's fine.
Okay.
But I think you have issues on why God would do it.
And this is really this, and it's a belief or it's a non-belief. You either believe that the word, so when I read the word of God, I always seek to know the truth. I don't want anybody's
Right,
opinion.
absolutely.
I got my own opinions, they're not worth anything,
Right.
trust me.
Right.
But the word of God to me is the inspired word of God.
I would
And
agree.
people write the word of God through the Holy Spirit. I mean, I'm not smart enough to write the word of God. It would be coming from Him. That's my faith.
Okay.
So-
Yeah,
And I know you're saying that, that's your choice.
No. I don't think it, because I agree with you 100%. The question becomes.
Go ahead.
And again, we're about done with this, so that's good. The question is, how do you define truth? And how do you define the way truth is conveyed? Let me take a step back. If I believe truth is conveyed through history,
Yeah.
therefore, if it's historical, it's got to be true.
Right.
If it's scientific, it's got to be true. If it's rational, it's got to be true.
I don't believe if it's scientific,
Wait,
it's very true.
hold,
Go
hold,
ahead.
just because I'm.
All right.
If I believe that,
Yeah.
then this has got to be historical. If this is conveying truth, then it's got to be historical. If I believe truth can be conveyed in other ways in history, then maybe I have to broaden my view of how I read what I read. For me, probably, and you may not even know this poem, you might, the most powerful poem, I will go back to it. I bet you I read it about 3 times a year, is a poem by a man named T.S. Eliot called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which if you ever have a chance to read it, it is a brilliant poem. It is wonderful. Was there a man named J. Alfred Prufrock? No, I don't believe there was. Is he writing about a historical person? I don't think he was. But the truth conveyed in that poem about not taking action when you could and then finding that you regret it later, is that true? Lord have mercy, it's true. Even though it has nothing to do with history and nothing to do with science, it has everything to do with truth. I think if we look at Scripture as a way to get truth, to hear the inspired Word of God, did God inspire this person to write history, or did He inspire him to write a story with a meaning?
Threads, okay.
You see what I'm saying? Believing that it's inspiration. When He inspires the psalmist to write a poem, is He inspiring him to write a poem or a narrative? Something that's historical.
But in all cases, my heart says to me that God always is going to tell the truth, whether it's history or whether it's His word. It's going to be true. God cannot tell a lie.
Right. And I'm just saying that what if this was never meant to be history?
Yeah.
What if this was never, ever written to be history? What if it was written to be a story? Like Jesus told the
Why would it be in the Bible?
Why did Jesus tell the parable of the prodigal son? Why did Jesus tell the story of the prodigal son? Was He describing a historical event?
Got it?
He was telling a story. What if this is more like the prodigal son than it is a historical event?
You don't think the prodigal son could have been a possible?
I didn't say could have been, but was it?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that becomes the question.
Yeah.
Was it given to outline a historical event that happened at one point, or does it convey a broader truth?
Well, the broader
What
truth
I'm-
is that God's arms always open to you when you come back.
Right,
and repent.
right, a broader truth.
Correct.
And that's what I
And that's
think is
what the Bible
happening.
tells
That's
you.
what I think is happening here.
Okay.
It's conveying a broader truth, not a limited historical.
I apologize, all you.
No,
I took over.
this is.
I apologize, but
I'll tell
I
you
loved
something.
it.
And I really appreciate what you did, because if you can go through Joshua and not have that question, then you're not reading Joshua. Because that's a question you got to have. How can God tell a people? In fact, we should have already. I've already had that question. God is wiping out thousands of people, based on things that don't seem like a big deal. Man, that's a problem. This is a huge problem. How do I deal with that? Well, that's a good question. We can either deal with it ignoring it, or we can talk about it. And you can come to different conclusions when you talk about it. And and that's okay. I think what's important is, regardless of how you read it, I think some conclusions create other problems. But we've got a radical obedience here, and that must be what the writer is trying to convey. Now, what we're going to see and what we look at next week is the consequence of disobedience, because we're going to see a situation where, and it's a very limited group, in numbers, a whole populations. It's just going to be a little tiny group that will disobey, and they will pay consequences for the disobedience, because that's what's happening here. Again, it's not going to happen in Judges. This is not what we're going to see in the book of Judges. So you kind of almost have to shift gears when you go from one to the other. So, any other questions? But this is good, because this is something that we need to talk about. This is something, because it has to do with how you read Scripture too. It has to do with how you approach Scripture, and how I approach Scripture, and that you need to know how I approach Scripture. Okay? Good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Any other questions about what we talked about with Jericho? Okay, Judy, how many times did you teach the kids Jericho?
Just thinking as I was reading that before about the story, the little song, Joshua.
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came up, tumbling down. So, okay. Then let's have a word of prayer, and then I'll tell you what we'll look at next week. Lord God, thank you so much for guiding us through this. And Lord, help us to take your word seriously enough to struggle a little bit with it. The things that cause us to think and to struggle, those are the things that are important. Help us never to look at your word as something that we can just read and move aside. But help us really try to find the truth that's there in these words that you are constantly re-inspiring, that you are inspiring anew. Help us to do that. And help us also to recognize that obedience is important. Obedience is important to you and should be important to us. So help us to make the decision to be more obedient. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Now next week we're going to be looking at chapters 7 and 8. And like I said, 7 and 8 will have to do with consequences of not obeying. And it's going to be interesting because the consequences, the disobedient are going to be a small group, but it has implications, broader implications. So, and we probably need to pray that you open that.
I will like it, huh?
Me too.